Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Now I have another FNAF theory, and it's not really a theory, it's really just explaining the timeline, the timeline, everything that happened, between everything, primarily I'm going to focus on sister location, the timeline of sister location. Hold up. Yeah. I'm going to talk about the timeline of sister location. This is heavily inspired by Unwithered Truth. Shout out to him. He's a really cool channel. My entire reason that I started making theory videos. Really saved me from a bad time in my life, really. So this video is meant to honor him. So, now we got shout outs out of the way. Let's go on to the reason I made this video. So, there's a lot of people who are dead confused on the timeline of sister location, did it come before FNAF 1 or after? Before FNAF 2 or after? Ah! And I'm here to throw my opinions into the ever so deep pool of FNAF theories. Oh god, this might be a long one. Without further ado, I'd like to point out some facts. So, first off, we got Circus Baby's Pizza World, which is heavily implied to be built in the 80s. So, from 1981 through 1983. It couldn't have been, and due to the FNAF timeline itself with Fredbear's Family Diner, it's implied to have taken place after the Bite of 83. So around 1984, because that's after 83. So 1984 to about 1983, to when Circus Baby's Pizza World could have ever been built. Now, another factor that would come into play is Elizabeth Afton's death. You know, the daughter of William Afton. And funny little story, when I was telling my dad the lore, I mentioned Elizabeth Afton. My dad asked, "Is she cute?" And I mentioned, "Dad, she's 8 years old." And my dad was like, "Oh, crap." Because he thought that she was over 18. Shout out to my dad, by the way. Really cool guy. And one of the major things that happened during Circus Baby's run, the run of Circus Babies, is that Elizabeth died and it caused the place to get shut down, but the publicly stated reason was because it was due to gas leaks. So, something that would go into play, which you probably already know if you've seen the source teasers, if you look into the source code of the teasers, is that it was only open for one day, which is confirmed to us in-game. Circus Baby did say it was only open for one day. So, put all of that into consideration. And I say that Elizabeth's death happened in 1984. It closed down in 1984. And Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, which is the successor to Pizza World, got opened the following year and would be open for many years, where these clunky, chunky metal murder robots, which I'll get into later, would be shipped to children's birthday parties. Now, We don't know when entertainment and rentals closed, but it might have been around when it might have been still open when Michael went down there, and closed when the animatronics came together and became entered and went inside Michael. Pause. And went inside his body. That sounds sus, sorry. And exited the world before Michael started rotting and turned purple. And Michael became too haunting in appearance to become any use to them. And they exited the body quickly and went into the sewers, leaving Michael's kind of somewhat hollow corpse, bright purple, thick with mold and fungus, rotting on the sidewalk. And then Michael stands up and walks back home. Okay, so that might sound confusing as hell to you. I know it was confusing to me. I'm just going to put that out there. But how this likely may have happened is because since the remnant was injected in his body due to the scooper, which is known in FNAF 6 as a remnant injecting device, both meant to remove the endoskeleton from animatronics and inject remnant into objects. Oh, hold up. Alright. So, Michael getting scooped by this scooper and having entered inside him a possessed animatronic by several souls caused a shit ton of remnant to enter his body and likely allowed him to survive. So, keep all of this in mind. And because it may be canon, who knows? Alright, another thing I'd like to talk about is other people's attempts to say that Michael Afton and got scooped before anything. So, a lot of people take Michael being labeled as Stinky Boy at the end of 420 mode in FNAF 1. People like to take that as evidence as being scooped before FNAF 1, which doesn't really make a lot of sense and is pretty weak evidence. Like, don't get me wrong, that could be the case, but a more likely scenario is it still means what it meant all the way back when it was first released. It was a way to make fun of players who beat the hardest night. Scott Cawthon was probably sitting up there like, oh wow, you think you're cool, you think you're sweet, you think you're awesome, you think you're the best guy alive, beating the hardest night in the game called Five Nights at Freddy's that I made? Well, guess what? You're fired. And you stink. And you suck. It's probably likely what he meant, but people have their own opinions. Also, firing somebody for smelling bad is not really reasonable, even for Fazbear Entertainment. And also, we gotta consider the fact that Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby being around for more than 30 to 40 years is probably pretty unlikely. And also the fact that we already see... we didn't already see something, but... So, and it'd also be extra unlikely that they hire a guy that's literally purple to work there. And also, even more unlikely, considering what Tape Girl says in Help Wanted, saying like, I'm gonna do a Tape Girl impression, hold up. You can always tell when a company's about to fire somebody. They like to make a paper trail before they can make a firing. Like silly things. Stuff that no one even would consider. Or suddenly become grave offenses. That was a pretty good accent, huh? Yeah, I should be a voice actor. Anyway, that seems like a pretty big reference to being fired for being stinky. And in the week before, Ralph mentions that even though they barely meet other employees in Fazbear Entertainment, that they're still family. So, it probably just doesn't mean anything other than the fact that Michael Afton just probably is stinky in general. So, yeah. And also, people take Fritz Smith being also stinky to him being the same as Michael Afton, which I guess maybe. Although, a friend of mine, who you may have heard, made a theory that William Afton is Fritz Smith, which I'm actually starting to think is canon, because, like father, like son, they look similar in appearances and have similar behaviors, except for the whole murdering children thing, but, I guess I could see it, but, So you might be wondering, right now, when do I think Sister Location took place? Well, that's when I'd like to bring up Molten MCI. So, it's implied heavily that the fun times are possessed. And these bitches are aggressive, constantly hurting and murdering staff, constantly trying to escape, consistently breaking down and not working properly. Easily the most unpredictable. There's some bitches and hoes for that. So, when we learned, back when Sister Location was the latest FNAF game, a lot of smart people composed that these clunky metal retards murdered a bunch of kids under William Afton's control and are now possessed by a new batch of kids. But now things are getting confusing because now there's a shit ton of things that would not make sense because how would they fit into the timeline? And how would that even work? But the moment FNAF 6 was released, it told a different story. So, in FNAF 6, we meet Candy Cadet. He tells 3 different stories. And one of those stories might not be referring to what I'm talking about. It might be talking about someone else, but because of the lefty DCI, which I fully believe in, because there's just so much evidence, like, and also the molten MCI, which is what I'm referring to. The molten MCI basically states that the missing children from FNAF 1 and 2, because, you know, the Wizards, also possess the fun times, and also, you know, Molten Freddy and Ender. Let me explain. So, during FNAF 3, when we see William Afton beating up the other animatronics with his fists, considering we see nothing in his hands in his minigame sprite, and the fact that Henry Emily says during the Insanity ending that William Afton overpowered them again, not with a weapon, but with his bare hands. So, what do we know by this? Well, we can infer that William Afton is overpowered, for one, and that he removed the endoskeleton from the FNAF 1 animatronics, took him down to sister location, possibly through tunnels, who knows, and melted it down, put the haunted molten metal into his scooper, and scooped the remnant into the fun times using his scooper. Sorry for saying the word scoop a lot. It's a fun word to say, sorry. I was just drinking something, sorry. So, more evidence comes from the fourth closet, you know, the trilogy. And I know it isn't canon, Eli, I've told you this, but certain elements of it can be used to solve the lore, like finding the name of Charlotte Emily, finding the name of Henry Emily, finding the name of William Afton. Okay, yeah, you get the point. It solves a lot of things, but like, one of the main things it solves is the molten MCI. See, in the books, in the fourth closet, in the Silver Eyes trilogy, William Afton takes the original 4 animatronics and melts them down into this giant, blobby scrap heap under his control. Now, a lot of people who first saw the novel, not the graphic novel, already know what it looks like by description. But the graphic novel shows it as this weird thing. Like, what the fuck is that supposed to be? But the regular novel again, referring to that again, we see the description. I mean, we hear the description. This is the description. William Afton removed the tarp. It slid over the giant blobby scrap heap, revealing it. It was an undefinable, massive blob of tangles, burnt wires, molten metal, endoskeleton parts, jumbled, shredded, melted, barely seen suit pieces. Now, there were certain elements that Jessica could see. A finger, a metal leg, an eye socket, and some eyes here and there. They were all in there. And they were in pain. End description. Now, this seems pretty similar to Molten Freddy. certain defiable parts and an undefiable mass of wires with some eyes here and there. So, put all of this together, and I'd say it's pretty damn clear that the molten MCI happened. And a lot of people are going to contradict me in the comments section, being like, but the animatronic was made a little bit after, so it would be redundant for them to possess. So, but, that didn't make sense. Like, you probably didn't hear me, but, like, so a lot of people are going to say that they already possessed it, and this animatronic was made way before the spirit. So, like, you might be wondering, how could he possess it? Well, William Afton, well, it doesn't matter. A spirit can possess any animatronic. Like, and remnant can be injected. I mean, William Afton literally does it to Funtime Freddy. This argument's pretty stupid, honestly. Like, when you really look into it. Also, it still doesn't make sense for, like, you know, any of what these other people argued to be true. Like I'm not saying it's wrong, but, like, you know. Anyway, so back to the point. More evidence pointing towards the molten MCI theory is in Help Wanted. In the Ennard vent repair section, we see several endoskeletons of the FNAF 1 characters inside a furnace, supposedly being melted down and extracted for remnant. So, what can we take from this? Well, you know, what I said earlier, molten MCI being true. I don't know why I asked. Anyway, so more evidence pointing towards this is Molten Freddy's design in general. Like, have you ever noticed how Molten Freddy's right eye is lit up? And how in the bad ending of FNAF 3, we see that the FNAF 1 animatronic heads have their right eyes lit up. Now, you might be contradicting me in the comments saying, Golden Freddy's right eye isn't lit up. Both of his eyes are, which might imply that Golden Freddy specifically isn't in there. But going back to Unwithered Truth, the right eye is clearly visible, but and is like the only one with the actually glowing. It's just the back of the surface being reflected, so it can, and being brightened, so it can be seen more because it's in the darkness. But honestly, it might just be pointing to Golden Freddy or the spirits inside Golden Freddy not being a part of the Molten MCI, but, like, still, like, who knows? Anyway, another thing to consider is the fact that Molten Freddy, as I said before, has his right eye lit up, just like the bad ending animatronic eyes. Now combine that with everything I said about the Molten MCI, I can safely say that Molten Freddy is the embodiment of the bad ending. Molten Freddy is the bad ending. Molten Freddy is what happened when you failed to release the spirits. They lived on. Their pain is now heated up and molten in an undefiable scrap heap with an old Funtime Freddy head that kind of looks bad. Molten Freddy is the embodiment of failing to save the children, failing to stop what happened back in 1985. Molten Freddy is the worst outcome. Anyway, back from those corny lines, I'm going to put together a timeline, which might sound like fan fiction, but before I do that, I'm going to just debunk some evidence proving what some people say about some people saying that FNAF 2 takes place after Sister Location. So, in FNAF 2, there exists a character named Mangle, a female version of Foxy, all mangled up and jumbled up in a scrap heap with some parts of her casing slapped on and looking like a giant metal tumbleweed had sex with a spider fox. So, some people say that Mangle was supposed to promote Funtime Foxy, even though Funtime Foxy was turned into Ennard. Let me disprove this real quick. I don't think Mangle being given the name Funtime Foxy during FNAF World is supposed to mean anything at all. I think it's just a cross-promotion, like when Funtime Foxy was still in service. Like when I proposed. So, what was it? I just heard some dogs crying, and I just looked outside. I didn't see nothing. So, anyway, so what I think happened with this poor version of Foxy. Well, during FNAF Help Wanted, we see Balloon Boy and Mangle masks during the trick-or-treat levels and in the pumpkin patch levels with the plush babies. Still hate those things. So, combine this with the fact that the Halloween DLC might be canon because we see the characters there everywhere, all the time, way too much, in later games, basically proving that they're canon. And the fact that Bagos, a Greek YouTuber, amazing YouTuber actually, probably the best FNAF YouTuber I've seen, period. Sorry, Matt Pat. He proposed that the FNAF 4 animatronics are really just Springlock suits based on that got turned into nightmares because this kid, the crying child, had nightmares because of them, and also he potentially may have the spirit of David Murray in him, also making things more scarier for him. Check out my video solving what's in the box to see how I got to that conclusion. So, put all of this in mind, and I think that Nightmare Mangle fixed Nightmare Mangle. Nightmare Mangle, both no damage done to her body, is canon. Now, I know you're going to try and contradict me and say something like that. I think, for one, I think that it is heavily implied, disturbingly so, that Nightmare Mangle was introduced in Fall Fest, then moved into Fredbear's. Then after the Bite of 83, she was moved into Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Then the MCI happened. Then she was redesigned into Toy Mangle. What also helps with this theory is the fact that it seems a little soon to just give up repairing her, because as we know in FNAF 2, kids loved this character so much that they started tearing her apart and slamming the pieces back together, and the staff had to recorrect their mistakes by fixing her constantly. So, combined everything I said, and also the fact that Mangle was specifically mentioned getting a redesign, when we know she's part of the toy animatronics along with Balloon Boy. She said, Phone Guy said during night one that they got a new redesign for the toys. Then he mentions another, specifically that Mangle got a redesign, when we know, she's a part of the toys. So, didn't you already mention that, Phone Guy? Why are you mentioning it again? I thought this as a kid. So I thought that Mangle, right now, I thought that Mangle was specifically redesigned from Nightmare Mangle to the current version of Mangle, like Toy Foxy. I don't think this is really a Foxy, but like a new member of Freddy and Friends. Foxina, maybe. That's the name I'm giving her. Foxina Funtime the Fox. That's my new name for her. That's my version of the fixed version of Mangle. What do you think of it? I think it's a nice name. Anyway, it's not about that. But more piece of evidence supporting this idea also includes the fact we see Mangle figurines in Elizabeth's room during 1983, during the crying child's last 5 days before being chomped on by Fredbear. More things supporting this idea include the fact that we see Balloon Boy balloons being held by this kid who disturbingly looks like Balloon Boy. Maybe he's one of the DCI kids who possesses Balloon Boy. So I think Nightmare Balloon Boy and potentially Nightmare JJ, along with Nightmare Mangle, are undeniably canon. And after the Bite of 83, they were moved to the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Yeah, around the one that closed in 1985. Along with the Unwithereds. Also, fun fact, I just learned that the word unwithered is an actual word. That's so stupid. Like, what? Anyway, so another thing people try to mention is the spring lock suit and sister location. Now, people are still on debate about this, and something I've learned is the phone call in FNAF 3 is on night 4 that one mentions the sister location. And where do you find a springlock suit in sister location? Night 4. And we also know that this springlock suit has face plates. And we know by Baby that this is the one that shut all of them, the others, down. So we know that this springlock failure was the one that shut the others down. Now, a lot of people try to say that the springlock failure was at Fredbear's, and it was the bite of 83. But we already know that Fredbear was performing, and since him performing would already, you mean that the springlocks were already activated, basically blaringly and blatantly saying and screaming in our face that springlock suits cannot fail if they're already activated. And a lot of people would try and say that, why would you word it that way, or say it like that, when there's a bunch of evidence that would support it, when I would say, why on God's green earth would you say that, why on God's green earth would Scott Coffin put a springlock suit on the 4th night, when the only other mention of a sister location prior in the franchise, I mentioned a springlock suit on night 4, where other people, where any other place where springlock suits were mentioned. Okay, I'm sorry about that. This is why we should really start viewing FNAF as a narrative experience rather than a perfect puzzle revealed by special clues we gotta see later down in the road. Alright. Now let's do an actual timeline. Alright, so after MCM, Murray's Costume Manor closed down because it got burned to the ground by Arnold, Fredbear's Family Diner was opened. It was a success and a hoot and a holler from 1979 to 1983. This is the bite of 87. After that, Freddy's is opened. Springlock suits are transferred from there to Freddy's. Fredbear is renamed Yellow Bear to continue using the character without, getting any weird looks and any cancellations and shutting downs by using the character that bit someone. So, after that, Henry Emily makes the puppet. Oh wait, sorry, I forgot to mention someone. In 1983, there was Fall Fest. And in Fall Fest, it introduced Balloon Boy, JJ, and Foxina Funtime, along with the Springlock suits of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, and Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, and some other characters. It was a huge hit, and Foxina Funtime and Balloon Boy and JJ were so popular they got moved to Fredbear's. But then after the bite of 83, they were moved to Freddy's. They were a huge hit there, especially Foxine at Funtime. And she constantly got so loved that the kids would tear her apart, literally, day by day, causing her to look like a giant metal scrap heap with her head on top. Now combine this with everything that's happening at the time. Henry Emily wanted a special animatronic to keep them watching, to keep the children safe. So he made the puppet. William Afton absolutely despises that puppet thing. If that puppet was around and his child got bit, nothing would have ever bad happened. So, since Fredbear was Henry Emily's main creation, and Michael Afton kind of already proved that it could fail because he put his brother in the mouth of Fredbear. William Afton wanted to prove that another one of Henry's creations could fail. So he puts a really heavy box with all his weightlifting, with all of Michael's weightlifting equipment that he loves, on top of the puppet, its music box, trapping it. He sneaks behind the pizzeria and waits for Charlotte to be thrown out of the pizzeria, like she always does, by the demon children at Freddy's. And when she finally does, William Afton lures her in like, yo, I found another way in. Come on, let's go. And kills her. The puppet finally breaks out of the box and sneaks outside and hugs Charlotte's corpse. And when the puppet is retrieved and Charlotte is found dead, William Afton is distraught to find purple tear marks on the puppet. Charlotte's soul is now inside that thing. William Afton also seems to notice that every time a hat that's not already black is put on Yellow Bear, it turns to black. William Afton also knows that his son, the crying child, likes black hats more. But when he's dreaming, the hats are yellow. Well, this is weird to him. So he decides to experiment even more. By making a new company, a new business, a new restaurant, with a little bit of Henry's help, because Henry wanted help. He's a nice guy. He opened Circus Baby's Pizza World, which was closed almost only one day after it was opened because Elizabeth got murked by Baby. Now, the entire reason William wanted to open it is because, as he already proved before, that Henry's creations could fail, and the parents would be so amazed by his perfect creations that they'd be too worried about them to worry about their children. And I also just mentioned that Elizabeth died, like literally one day. And her death was covered up as well by William, saying that it was due to gas leaks, and he escorted them all out. Then one day, he gets fed up with Michael and decides to used nightmare gas on him to make him see the exact nightmares that the crying child had, using some spare costumes of the Springlock versions of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica on wheels. So then, the year is now 1985, and William Afton decides, you know what, I'm going to ruin everything. There are several thoughts in his mind, like how the crying child possessing Yellow Bear, Charlotte Emily possessing the puppet, and Elizabeth possessing Circus Baby, which causing her bright blue eyes starting to turn green. So, William Afton has a lot of thoughts in his mind. But he puts on the Springlock suit, the Bonnie Bun suit anyway, and walks out there. It was June 1985. A birthday party was being held at Freddy's. There was children running through the big rooms of Freddy's. Their favorite characters there: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Yellow Bear was out of service, but it was kind of usual somewhat. And who could forget Foxy and a Fun Time and Balloon Boy and JJ? They were pretty cool. Oh, not as cool as the others. The on-stage versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy they malfunctioned, so they were in the back right now. But the Springlock suit versions of them, they were used. They were entertaining the children, telling them jokes, playing tag or hide and seek with them as usual. William Afton decided to wear his Bonnie Bun suit, basically Spring Bonnie, and he lured Gabriel and Jeremy first. Actually, no. He lured Susie Lamone and Fritz Smith first into the back room. He killed them. Susie was stuffed into Chica, along with her dead dog that William Afton ran over that late yesterday. Fritz was stuffed into Foxy, his favorite character. After that, William Afton took a lunch break. Then he lured 3 more children. There was Gabriel Smith and Jeremy Maglesias. Gabriel and Jeremy were both stabbed, and Jeremy had his arm and face removed. A little bit after Gabriel was stuffed into Freddy. They died slowly a bit, then eventually died at the same time. The last girl was Cassidy. Yellow Bear's stomach was opened. The vengeful spirit of the crying child, trying to stop the body from being shoved in. The still living body of Cassidy was eventually dropped in. The stab wounds from Cassidy set off the spring locks, which were wound back, and the endoskeleton parts and the crossbeams and blades and spring-loaded rods and clamps and pins were slammed into place, crushing Cassidy into an undefinable mass of squirting blood and flesh. She died without an ounce of mercy. Anyway, with that dark story out of the way, the MCI, which I just told the story of, possessed the Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, and the Yellow Bear animatronics. After that, Freddy's closed, and there was another restaurant made. Freddy Fazbear's Junior Funhouse.
Dad.
Hold up. Anyway, so there was a new attempt on the restaurant. You know, I mentioned that just now. The new toys animatronics. Technological, touch of youth security. Also known as toys. Oh, I swear, they always come up with the name before the acronym. So, these toys, they were meant to protect children. Facial recognition software, scanning faces, all that jazz. But they had a major flaw. They kind of sucked at their jobs, so, like, you know, stuff happens. Now, Foxina Funtime plus Balloon Boy and JJ were remade to fit the toys, and they even had the same technology as the toys. And the same thing that happened with Foxina Funtime happened again. And eventually the staff just freaking quit it. Oh my god. And decided to just make her into a pull apart and put back together attraction. You know, like they just got tired of it, you know? So, eventually, the DCI happened with William Afton putting on the Yellow Bear costume. Then luring in 5 more kids. A boy named John, another boy named Carlton, a girl named Jessica, another girl named Marla, and another kid named Cody. They all died. Now, with the 2 spirits possessing the Yellow Bear costume, it caused a spring lock failure on William, but he managed to get out of it. Causing more agony and remnant to come from the suit for being used for murder and spring locking the guy. William Afton's in damaged Yellow Bear again, and making him look like Winter the Golden Freddy. And then, with parts of the MCI robots in their endoskeletons, and with everything else with the DCI and the messy facial recognition software, they became super aggressive. One of them even bit a guy. The toys were shut down and scrapped. Parts of the robots being used to refurbish the Wizards, turning them into the classics. Then eventually, Michael Afton became the night guard and security guard there, where he met his father's victims. Now, before William Afton went to grab the endoskeletons, after William Afton grabbed the endoskeletons from the originals, melted them down, and injected them into his kooky, clunky, fun-time robots. And before he tried to go get the Yellow Bear endoskeleton, because the spirits inside Yellow Bear possessed a random Freddy suit, turning it piss yellow, basically making classic Yellow Bear, the one we see in FNAF 1. Before Eric William could get his hands on it, he instructed Michael to go to the sister location to see if he could get Elizabeth out of there. William Afton goes to try and get the Yellow Bear, but gets cornered by the spirits, and he hides in the Bonnie Bun Springlock suit, aka Spring Bonnie, and gets springlocked. This time, every springlock in the costume fails and crushes him, destroying all his bones, flesh, organs, everything. His body explodes and blood floods the suit and staining the floor and walls. The children then seal the safe room, leaving him there to revel in his pain. But with all the remnant he collected, his bones reconstructed themselves, because we see bones in Scrap Trap, so we know there's bones in there. A bit more of his scrunched flesh repairs slightly, making it look like a conjoined mess in there. And he also doesn't die. Anyway, Michael gets scooped, and Ennard climbs inside him, and he throws Ennard out into the sewers before he collapses, then wakes up. Anyway, what did y'all think of the timeline theory that I just made? Say it in the comments. This is the longest video I've ever done. Good God.